Hey, everybody. Oh, Jesus. Okay. It is really bright up here. Welcome to When Data Makes Marketing Experiences Awesome. There's the clicker they built for me. My name is Mike Reeder, and I work at a digital agency here in Seattle called Possible. And we're definitely hiring, so come talk to me afterwards.
Total plug. Come on. Razorfish is hiring too.
Yes, and so is Starbucks. It's a good time to be in Seattle, right? I'm also on the board of advisors for the Seattle Interactive Conference, and I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming out this year. This has definitely been the best year of the three, and it's because of you guys coming out and asking great questions and really putting the onus on us to give you good product every year. And I hope I don't tank that today, actually. I probably said that. Okay, so why we're here is we're going to talk about audiences. We're going to talk about the important role that media is playing in the sort of lives and experiences that the audiences of brands are experiencing today. In our business, we'll talk a little bit about this, but we've seen the role of media change dramatically, and I would say the last 5 to 7 years. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's moved way beyond sort of dumb pipes and distribution. In fact, media is a really big deal in the marketing and advertising business right now. Everybody familiar with MDC Partners, the holding company of Crispin Porter, 72 and Sunny, and others? They just made a massive analytics data hire from Harrah's Entertainment, of all places, to delve into the consumer insights and the numbers behind their campaigns to solidify more long-term clients. Is everybody familiar with Nate Silver? Yeah. So rumors got out sort of in the spring that he was going to leave the New York Times, and he was besieged by agencies to come work for them. He ended up going and working at ESPN, which I actually think is kind of sad, because I don't think we need more data at ESPN. So
they do a good job, though. They do a good job. You know, the omni-channel thing, they got it nailed.
That's actually a good point. Okay. Okay. And I love this quote. I did some interviews last year for a client who shall remain nameless. And I've always used this quote, and the only way that he would let me do it is if I left it nameless. And I don't know if it's a resource thing or bad communication thing, but I can't tell you how often I ask about the behavior of my audience only to get shrugs from my agency. We were his agency, so that didn't bode well. So we're going to try and solve that today and talk a little bit about the data behind the campaigns. So let me start with some introductions here. This is Patrick Cartmel. Patrick is the VP of National Strategic Accounts for Undertone and a good friend. And this is Megan Tweed.
Hello.
She is the Vice President of Media for, it was Razorfish? Is that what you said?
Don't be sassy.
Okay, easy. Okay. And then last is Kirsten, and she's the Senior Director of Xbox Digital. You probably shouldn't be here today. As you may know, Xbox One is launching in a mere 20 days, and Kirsten should be hiding under a desk somewhere.
25.
25.
There's a countdown clock at Microsoft.
So thank you for coming, right? We appreciate it. I swear to God that I'm not going to say the word big data, and if somebody up here says big data, Kathy Maybe, who's the co-founder of SICK, will give you a drink ticket. So keep track. I don't know if Kathy's here. We're also not going to dig into why sort of Facebook is not using their data to give you relevant advertising in your news feed, or who these guys are, but I don't think that he's actually on Facebook. That's what you get when you that's what you get when you look up Facebook data. And we're not going to talk about real-timing your Twitter feeds. I know that's a hot topic here. I actually think there's a panel happening right now about this on the first floor. So you're welcome to go if you want to do that. I just love my favorite color hashtag toothbrush is, and it had 3 retweets. So anyway, yeah. So here's what we are going to talk about. Data evolution in media, data as a competitive advantage, data and personalized experiences, And then this wonderful thing that's beginning to happen to brands when they can bring their data to the forefront and become, in many ways, a media company. And I actually think that's a really sort of massive sea change for the people on this stage, and we're going to kind of jump into that as well. So let's go. So one of the things that we talked about in the very first conversation we had about this panel was the evolution of media, right? Just this idea that 5 to 7 years ago we were stuck in a very static space where it was about demo and zip code. And then what we've done is we've been able to move into behavioral. So we've talked about Blue Kai and some of the places like that. And then this notion of sort of marketing to where you currently are, geofencing, obviously mobile devices are huge in that. And then where we're going, this notion of predictive marketing. So I kind of wanted to start there because I actually think that's a pretty good place to ground it. And so maybe I'll start with, where do you see your clients or your brands within this? And obviously there's big gaps here, but where do you see them operating right now?
We often talk about it as a move away from buying impressions to managing audiences. And actually, I think this was introduced when social platforms actually, came into being, the behemoths that they are now. Everyone wanted to know, is my best customer there or not? And so looking at all of these siloed off CRM, paid media, this is, social, this is, my .com presence, my mobile presence, and understanding how they're traversing all of those platforms and using data to actually give them what they want on those platforms instead of every time they show up, hey, where'd you come from? I don't know anything about you. Picking up the ball and running it down the field.
Yeah, and I think we're even trying to go further. Instead of just trying to identify who audiences are, is actually go after very particular life situations. So it's not just about who you are and are you somebody that wants my product, but how does my product fit in your current life situation, where you are in a particular place and time as well.
I agree. I see a lot of what we do as being mediators between an individual and a brand. And I think that, when the individual is telling you with all their behaviors, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want from you, if a brand can respond appropriately, you're actually going to see performance. So the individual's happy, the brand's happy, everybody's getting what they need.
I think the other element I would add is the concept of the environment that you're in. And so some of it is what do you know about the actual individual user, but some of it is what is that user trying to do? What's the environment that they're in, and what is it they're trying to get out of that experience? And so how do you connect in a way where, whether it's because you know something specifically about that user or because you know that this person is interested in entertainment, and therefore what's the right message and what's the right format?
When you guys are working with, so this is specifically here, when you guys are working with clients, what percentage are you seeing that are willing to get into some of the further downstream stuff here?
I mean, with current clients, we've been working for a few years to get clients. I would say like the last 4 years, we've had clients asking about this, or we've been taking these types of data management solutions to them, or trying to up-level the importance of them doing that type of work. But in every single new business pitch, there's interest in it. So I think that's a big indicator of, we're moving towards that place.
Are you guys, Patrick, maybe you better served to answer this. Are you guys doing anything around predictive right now?
More and more, and can't go into the secret sauce of it, but certainly when you think about something like a Google Now, and other areas where there's utility that's actually giving you predictive value in terms of your own life. So when you think about the personal concierge space, et cetera, it gives us more and more ability to actually go out and do the predictive. And what I think about predictive, I think it's going to be a very interesting space, because I think one of the things we were talking about is there's examples of even Target through their data analytics actually knows when you're pregnant before you do. I think that's a pretty scary thought.
Has everybody heard that story?
Sometimes they've messed it up though. You're like, yeah. What is this?
Yeah.
But that we are getting so good at data and people's behaviors that we can see something like that. I don't think that's probably the best use for a marketer, but certainly more and more we're investing a lot in our data intelligence and trying to tease out things that are very valuable for a marketer from a predictive standpoint.
One of the conversations that we had that I thought was super fascinating was just the notion of immediacy, and you know, versus.
Yeah, I mean, moving into this place, I mean, it used to be you take, you know, a bunch of money to market, this is how it performed, all right, good to know, and then next time you're planning, you take a bunch of money to market, and maybe what you did kind of informed how you plan it. But now, you know, as the campaign's in market, as, you know, you're putting content out there and you're putting ads out there and you've got the, you know, email channel going and you've got social channels going, there's this ability to say, well, they did this, that, and this, and so the next thing that would be the most intelligent to put in front of them would be this, you know, and it's not about just, you know, sell them shoes, buy the shoes, buy the shoes, buy the shoes. It may be, I put this piece of content in front of them, and they're this amazing content amplifier for me. You know, they share it all, they love it, they talk about it, they tweet about it, and it activates the brand and the business in a totally different way. And I think that's totally compelling, you know, when brands can actually orchestrate that well on a segment by segment, individual by individual level.
Do you think that, you know, one of the conversations I'd had with somebody yesterday was just this notion of, it used to be 6 months, like I would maybe go buy a car, and it would, you know, the credit reporting company, it would take 6 months for them to get my data, you know, sort of pushed out to marketers. 6 months later, I'd start getting, you know, direct mail pieces around oil changes.
Yeah, I think people's level of comfort with data is getting better. I think people got kind of freaked out when they first saw the ad where, you know, I just went to Amazon and was looking at this pair of shoes, and 3 minutes later it's showing up as ads. And I think the first experience that people had with that was, this is spooky.
It was clunky too, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we were taking the technology and just sort of, okay, well, fix it and forget it. I got this retargeting program, so they're going to visit Zappos or whatever, and then it's going to be sell the shoes, sell the shoes, sell the shoes. You actually need to be a bit more nuanced with what you put in front of people. Some folks might be ready to buy the shoes, but some folks are just going to, you know, be checking something out and not be into like this high-frequency closer campaign.
And it's probably the worst example of data that you could use. Has no human insight that you think about what are the emotional triggers, what's driving purchase behavior. It's just, hey, you looked at this, I'm going to sell this to you.
Well, and I think it's also being careful about what data you look at and what you optimize against. Because if you are trying to both sell a pair of shoes but also create a lasting, you know, relationship with the consumer, you know, it may not be the right thing to only optimize for purely the click. If you're, you know, doing something that's detrimental to your brand. So I think, you know, going back to Nate Silver, the signal and the noise, it's like being able to look at, okay, what part of this data is the most relevant, and is there a nuance here that we need to consider, that we can't only isolate one data point, we need to think about it more broadly. The other thing, the woman that runs social media for Xbox on my team, she has a great expression which I love, which is that social media is like the canary in the coal mine. You know, we can sort of out in social, you know, that's our canary. We can see how people are reacting to messages or to different titles, and we learn a lot from that. And so, you know, there's things you can learn every single day before you then go put a ton of media behind something. So that's another something we pay attention to.
I totally agree. And, you know, you can take a bath in data. There's so much data out there, and brands have finally realized that this is one of their best assets. But really getting in there and figuring out which cues across all of this ecosystem of platforms are the most important ones, and how do they hang together? If somebody's only opening an email when there's a great sale and they're only clicking on an ad when there's a great offer, they might be only interested in promotional type stuff from you. If somebody's watching a bunch of content across, you know, all of these touch points, then they just want to engage with you in that way. So really, you know, figuring out the relationship between these behavioral cues.
Do you have just to sort of wrap this piece up, do you guys have any sort of predictions on where this is going to go next, and maybe how you're hiring against it or thinking about your staff?
I think more and more, I think the smart money is going to go to not just using data to do audience targeting, and using it more and more for creative insights, human insights in terms of what you're positioning overall. I think that part of the science is very underserved. And I think what gets overserved is the whole audience targeting part of it. You know, it's really, if you think of, if you took like offline examples of how ads are measured, if we were buying out of home and we bought a billboard on the highway, and then we had a billboard in front of our store, the way that we track things and display with audience targeting, you would always put more money on your store sign. Because you'd say, that's got the best ROI, because this many people saw it and this people went in the store. So we've got a really skewed view, and I think there's a danger of over-indexing on what we can do on the audience side of data.
I think the other exciting part, I know this is a digital conference, but television buying is going to become much more sophisticated. That's one thing, just having been in media. I came in from the digital side and then ended up taking over all of our traditional media as well, and I was just floored at the lack of sophistication in TV buying. And so, it's exciting to see companies like Specific Media and other companies that are starting to really evolve television buying to hopefully bring everything we've been doing in digital for quite some time into the television space.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm waiting for the creative experiences on connected TV platforms to really, live up to their potential. If I can take data and, put together a personalized experience on those platforms, it's going to be awesome.
Right now, it's clunky.
Right now, it's just,
It'll be that,
static
but so was behavioral back in the day, and we were getting it wrong constantly, right? Great. Well, I mean, one thing that we sort of glossed over was, so Xbox, for example. I don't know how many people have seen the new Xbox One spot. Who's seen that here? Yeah. Well, there's your media buy. The immediacy by which that spot entered into the social space, right? I actually don't know if you premiered it there or not. Did you?
Xbox One is launching on November 22nd. I won't make this promotional, but we launched our ad campaign on Friday, first in our own channels. So, we lit up first on our website, on our social channels, email out to our user base, our Xbox Live user base. And then we only added paid media a few days later. So on Sunday, we premiered on Sunday Night Football, and then on YouTube Takeover. So, there's a lot even in that set of statements that has evolved, at least with some of the brands I've worked with. We launched first in digital. We launched first in earned media. And then we launched essentially simultaneously in digital and on television.
Well, obviously Microsoft is a media company, so, there's that, but you launching within your own properties, it's a nice segue into the conversation around brands becoming, media companies, media networks. Looking at the power of Microsoft, that's kind of its own behemoth, but clients that we've been working with for years, that we've built websites for and apps and, have been driving traffic to forever, looking at that audience and actually seeing the amazing value of those folks that are engaged with you on those platforms, and not only using those, that audience when you're going to market yourself, but looking at the potential for monetizing that audience and becoming a publisher yourself and actually either selling your data, to the folks that are out there taking campaigns to market, and interested in targeting your consumers, but actually turning these properties into publishing platforms, potentially. It's a brand new space for a lot of companies.
Right. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about data as a competitive advantage for you guys and what you're doing. And one of the things that we talked about last week was House of Cards and just the notion of Netflix getting into the original content space. And the way that they did it, I don't know how many people here have actually read this case study, but the New York Times did a very nice, I think it was about a week and a half ago on it. It was essentially a focus group of 33 million subscribers, and what they did was they basically they knew they wanted to get into the original content space. They basically just culled all their data to figure out what would be the most likely scenario for them to be successful in this space, and that was, which director should they use? Which actor should they lead with? What kind of show should it be? And they landed on House of Cards. So they had David Fincher and Kevin Spacey. And then what the content was political drama. And so my question to you guys on that is, the idea of polling the user behavior, what you've been watching, what you're interested in, is really, really powerful in the notion of product creation. And I don't want to get into a huge wormhole on that, but what are you guys seeing around that?
Yeah, there's an interesting relationship, I think, between the two about product creation and data. because I think that the people that are doing it best are actually folks that are creating their own data. And a lot of times they're creating their own data through utility, through a product, et cetera. Nike Plus is an example of that. Xbox is an example of that, where there's a lot of utility. There's an amazing value exchange between the brand and the end user, and the data is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and definitely seen as brands start to become more nimble and either build up internal or external resources for creating branded content. They put the branded content out there, and sometimes they'll be creating content for women who are 18 to 34, put it out there and see, actually, it's it's sort of a mixed bag, and it's hitting more on the older side of this, or it's more male female. And maybe that's the right target audience for you. Maybe they have interest in your product, and maybe you're trying to force fit something. So I think just seeing over and over as they take actual content out to market, and adjusting things on the fly.
One of the things that we actually did together a few years ago, we had a mutual shoe client. And one of the things that we found is that the shoes themselves, it was essentially a Nike ID, and it was the idea that, so we were running the media across athletic sites, like make your team shoe, do this. And one of the things that we found in the way that the shoes were being created and the media was being consumed was that it was massive in the art community. It had nothing to do with athletics. And yeah, there were some teams that were making their shoes, but it turned out to be this art community online. So then what we ended up doing was like redoing the entire campaign. It was super successful after we did that. I just love that notion of sort of media behavior influencing the way that you build your products, or the thinking that you put into it. And you can do it so much quicker now. I go back to that 6-month thing.
Well, yeah, we have to have a much more, when we think about product design or advertising campaigns that we do, they've got to be much more fluid. And it's got to take into account real-time feedback that you're getting. And I think that, we're used to very linear cycles of, I produce my product, it goes out to this audience, and then a year later I reset. You've got to be very nimble. And whenever we do campaigns, we look at them as works in progress. And we're always willing to say, how do we optimize this? How do we rethink it? How do we take the new data that's coming in and optimize against that?
I think the other thing I would say, is thinking, as you apply data, I think Netflix was brilliant in this scenario, because Netflix is obviously in a very competitive space. For them, original content is a huge differentiator. And so they needed to come up with something that would help build their brand in a totally different way and create that emotional connection. And I think that's where the power lies, which is not only obviously creating content that people care about, but actually creating that longer term relationship. People I think very differently of Netflix now. Largely, this helps start that. And I know at least for Xbox, we are a content platform, and so every day in and day out, we have a relationship with you through your Xbox, and we want to give you content that you find relevant. I know my kids play a lot of Minecraft, and so I see a lot of Minecraft content come across, and I end up buying. I spend a lot of money on Minecraft texture packs because my kids find it, and thankfully they at least ask me. But that's that's the example of that relationship. That's content that's relevant to our family, and so I think particularly for a media company like a Netflix or an Xbox, it's part of your relationship with that consumer, and consumers are sophisticated. I don't think you can't get away with serving content that's not relevant like that. That will not work anymore.
Yeah, and I would even I would call Xbox would refer to a lot of what you're doing as relationship media, and what I mean by that is you're really pulling somebody into an ecosystem and making it a part of their life, and not just having a short-term memory about what they do, but a long-term memory. It's very effective.
I refer to it as curating. There's so much out there. There's so many decisions that we make every single day. I mean, whether we like it or not, part of our experience as human beings is being a consumer. And every single minute of every day, practically, there's these decisions that we're making in our head about this is appropriate, this is not appropriate, like that, don't like that, need that, don't need that. And all of those cues that we're sort of leaving throughout this digital ecosystem, if you will, if brands can pick those up and start to curate things for us, and it's not just brands that are trying to sell us stuff, but publishing brands and editorial sort of experiences and beautiful artistic sort of experiences, and start to curate the world a bit more so it's what we're actually interested in. Then I don't know about you guys, I don't want to spend 4 hours shopping for a toaster. Like I want to know, okay, these are the 4 toasters I should worry about. They're in my price range. They're the brand that I want. Done. And then there's other times where I want to spend a ton of time looking through a bunch of stuff about music or these amazing little niche artists that I found, and I want to see that. I want it in front of me, and I want to have to go dig it up.
And so then where do you see? So obviously, Netflix is not an anomaly. I mean, this is happening over and over again. I think they've got like 4 more shows coming out this year. Mm-hmm. Where are you guys going in terms of, where are your heads at where this is going to go next?
Well, I think that, and we're doing a lot of work on this with the Olympics, with a lot of our advertisers, is really thinking about real time and what are things that are happening right now, and how can we be nimble enough and use data to appropriately market to people. And it's tough to do something like that.
Well, and actually leading up, because there's so few big moments anymore, right? They're all like micro moments.
Right.
So the Olympics is a big moment, and how you're building up to that is probably going to be pretty important. Okay, I'm going to switch gears again. Data and personalized experiences. So what I've realized is on these slides, I've included a ton of buzzwords, and so I apologize for that. But everybody kind of understands what we mean by personalized experience. And I found this, somebody sent me this little thing here, which I thought was great. I actually have one of these bands. Has anybody used the Disney Magic Band before at either Disney World or Disneyland? It's kind of new. And what it basically is there's a little chip inside the band that you've been to resorts and places where you basically have a wristband and you pay for things. But what it also does is actually gets you into the correct line. It manages your entire experience.
Does it just zap you when you're in the wrong line? Oh God, sorry, wrong one.
That actually wouldn't be a bad idea. One of the things that one of the articles was actually talking about was, has anybody ever had the Dole Whip? You see this thing up here? Apparently, it's the most popular food at Disney World, and I've never even heard of it, so I did a bunch of research. And this is off topic, but it appears to be whipped cream and pineapple. So, But anyway, my point on this one is, with this band, Disney is able to completely manage your park experience. So they'll be able to tell how long you've been in line. They'll be able to tell what products you're buying, when you went to the pool at the hotel, which rides you went on, the kinds of accoutrements to your band that you bought, the other things that you bought in the park. And they're going to be able to use all of that data so that when you leave, when they invite you back, you're suddenly getting a coupon for 10 free Dole Whips. Whips.
You like the whips, don't you?
I'm dying to go. I'll be honest. But they've seen an 8-time ROI return. Like, that's a massive. Like, people are really. The feedback on it is it's actually making the park experience so much better, and it's this, and we're going to talk about this in the next section, but it is that ongoing relationship that Disney now has with you. And what I'm fascinated by is sort of like, where do they take it? Do they put it into movie theaters so they can see people going from parks to movies or whatever that's going to be? And so what I wanted to talk about with this one was, where are you in the media space? Where are you guys seeing sort of best-in-class personalization?
I would say that best-in-class is something that we're still building, to be honest. I look at a lot of what clients are doing, and it is the fix it and forget it. It's the templatized, I'm just going to feed in headlines and some images, and some of them are going to be what you saw, and some of them are going to be, something else that might make sense for you to buy. I think the logic behind what's powering those experiences in a lot of cases is lacking. The strategy's not there. It's just, taking a vendor instead of treating it like a partnership. It's just put it into place and let it do its job and optimize towards performance. So I think it's lacking. I look at what Innovid is doing though in the video space and the ability to build these overlay experiences where you can personalize aspects of it and give people more content or connectivity to your social platforms or piping in some of that social connectivity directly. And when that's actually based on the fact that you know someone engages with you on Twitter, or you know someone is a Twitter follower of yours. That makes it a little bit more relevant. It's something that people will actually want to have in front of them, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, I think there's physical products like this band or Nike Fuel band. In the advertising space, it's obviously a little bit of a different, experience that you're building, but I think some of the same principles apply, right? You want there to be a value exchange between whoever's going to wear this thing that you've created or who's interacting with your advertising, and that means it needs to be, simple. It needs to be easy to use. It can't be overcomplicated. You can't make it too hard for the user. They can't have to take 10 steps to get this amazingly personalized digital experience, right? You need to simplify and kind of curate yourself. We've developed an interactive demo to help demonstrate Xbox One. It's on our website, and we went through a lot of thought and thinking through what's the right level of customization. Do we have someone tell us, like, hey, I'm into sports, and then we present them a demo, or do we just make some assumptions and then let them play with it? And so I think it's just thinking through, what are you trying to achieve? What is like a simple, clean way to do that? And ideally in a way that actually, connects with that user because it's relevant.
I think, can I jump back in? Sorry.
You want to say something? No, I really quick. I was just going to say that, for us, where we're working the most is how do you connect this data across environments? Yeah. So from the in-store experience, the TV experience, the mobile experience, the online experience, connecting all those it's what keeps us up at night. And I would say that we spend 50% of our time trying to solve for that, for our advertisers.
Yeah, some of the work that we're doing right now is within the mobile platform. So if I've seen that you've shopped online with us and you've potentially shopped the mobile web with us or an app or what have you, and then, I know you're out at a competitor's store within 5 miles of my retailer's store, then I'm going to, send a push notification through my client's app and actually say to you, that thing that you were looking at, I will give it to you for 20% off, and we're just right around the corner. And so that's an interesting, useful thing.
See,
I would
that.
leave the store for 20% off and go 5 miles.
And a lot of that is there's a lot of advertisers out there that the in-store experience is just getting ambushed by things like Shop Savvy. Yeah. And there's a lot of heartache at the CMO level.
Yeah. Are you guys for this for this audience? What are some lookouts on personalization they should be thinking about?
So explain lookouts.
Well, we talked earlier about maybe some of the predictive stuff, like Target, for instance. Like that to me is a lookout. Like if you're going to make assumptions, you better be right, because if you're wrong, it's kind of creepy. But around personalization, because I was in a session yesterday and somebody had asked a question and they were really irate about getting some banners that had nothing to do with the world they were living in.
I would say one of the lookouts is that it goes back again to over-indexing on the audience behavior, and taking my analogy again, it's. I wonder what would happen to Google's market cap if we all kind of woke up and said, do I really want to pay Google for the last thing I do before I buy a product? Because if I'm going to AT&T and I'm going to buy a Samsung phone, the last thing I do before I do that is I say, Samsung Galaxy phone, AT&T, press enter, and for some reason I have to give Google 50% or 50 cents to complete that transaction as an advertiser. I think it's not wise. I think that there are better ways that we can spend our dollars. I actually think search is probably a better upper funnel mechanism than lower funnel. And I think as marketers, we've just got to course correct for that.
I would say collect all the cues that you can. So don't just look at upper funnel, they're shopping. Actually look at, did they convert, did they purchase, did they buy something really similar so they're potentially out of market for what they were looking at. It's not that I, didn't buy that pair of Fry boots that I really want. Maybe I bought another pair that's just as awesome. So stop showing me the ones I was looking at. I think the cues are important, and a lot of times, we are so siloed off. We've got the email folks doing their thing. We've got the media folks doing their thing. And if you don't look at across all of these different digital platforms, all of the cues, then you're going to miss something important.
Yeah, I think connecting creative and media is critical, because you could have on the media side, you could have a brilliant idea of how to do incredible targeting. But then if you're not connected enough on the creative side to take advantage of that, you've just added all this targeting, but you haven't customized your message, for example. But also just thinking through your audience strategy end-to-end across all your channels. So, we haven't talked that much about direct marketing, but obviously, depending on the brand, that's where people usually have a lot more rich data. And so how do you think through how to connect through direct marketing mechanisms to your audiences, and how does that connect to then what you're doing out in broader digital and traditional advertising?
And I would even say where product teams and marketing teams are very divided, those people long-term are going to lose out. And we do see that more and more, because I get a broad view of Fortune 500 advertisers. More and more I see very strong connections, especially around the data between the product and the marketing teams.
I would also caution, too, that you need to bring your head up out of the data sometimes and look at the big picture. The minutia of all of these behaviors and cues and all that is wonderful, and you need to tie it together. But you also need to bring your head up and look at the fact that these are people. They have values, they have lives, they have things they care about besides being consumers. So how do you take what you know about what they're doing, how they're traversing the web, and the type of content they're looking at, and actually look at something more big picture and say, you know what, these people actually care about these types of things. Let's do something bigger and broader, that's potentially less targeted but makes sense and appeals to them.
So I want to get to this piece here, because this is the one we've been kind of dancing around, this notion of brands plus data, and brands actually literally turning into their own media companies. And I remember a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, Best Buy setting up their own media network. And just the idea that they would go directly to Pepsi and just bypass the agencies altogether and sell media on their network, because they have all that data on their audiences. And I remember just being stupefied by that. Well, wait a second.
It made so much sense, though.
Right.
Right. I mean, we spent so many years working with them, and we went to them and we were like, you've got 30 million plus people, visiting your site all the time. They're amazing people. This is what we know about them. We can help you do this. We can help you figure out, what's your voice, what's your editorial voice. How do you take this classic e-commerce environment and actually make it more enriching and valuable to people by bringing content in and by bringing advertisers in. It's like it's a multi-million-dollar business for them, and that's brand new revenue.
Well, one of the things that we talked about earlier, so I've got a slide up here with some examples. Amazon, and obviously Nike, with the Nike Plus ecosystem, Xbox One now, and even and Starbucks, through the app, through their portal. There's a lot of really interesting movements happening. And I love this quote from Stefan Olander at Nike. He's the VP of Digital Sport, and he says that once you've established a direct two-way relationship, that you don't need to advertise to people anymore. And so for a brand like Nike to just cut their ad spend almost in half, just say, you know what, guys, we're an RM company now, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to directly to our customers, and we're going to own our own media channels. So that raises, in my opinion, a ton of really interesting questions for us and what we're going to do in our industry as this is happening. Mm-hmm. So I want to know your sort of thoughts about that, how it's going to impact us.
Well, I think there are very few brands that actually have big enough distribution where they can do that. And great for them. I would put Xbox there. I'd put Best Buy there and Nike. But I think most brands don't have a credible distribution platform like that. And they depend on publishers who have audiences. And I think that will remain.
I think it's also, even I think I agree with your point, basically. There are a number of brands that have very large distribution, and then that's lovely for them. But at the same time, every brand is evolving, every product is evolving. So even Nike, where they do spend their money, it's a new category, or it's a highly competitive category. So yes, there are certain categories where they can put out a beautiful piece of marketing and things happen, and that's great. But I do think every brand, at some point, if you're expanding your audience or you're expanding your value proposition, you still need to go outside of. So it's that finding that relationship between where where I do have a relationship with you and Xbox. I feel very fortunate to work for a brand, for one, that has very broad reach. So we have 48 million Xbox Live subscribers. We have 22 million Facebook fans. So we do fall into a category of, we do have a lot of consumers that we have a two-way relationship with. That said, we are evolving our brand. We're expanding broadly beyond gaming and entertainment. We want to bring new people into our ecosystem. We're in a super competitive category. So, while we leverage those channels and I think even the way we've orged, so my team, I own all of our direct channels, but I also own all of our digital channels. So we're able to look kind of end to end at, all right, well, what are we trying to achieve and what can we accomplish in each channel? And so I think, over time, it's a matter of trying to, it's like thinking through that funnel and thinking through where I do have a two-way relationship, what's the right way to communicate with you, but where you're in a place of, you're not aware yet, how do I move you down and how do these things all work together?
I love the idea of, and I don't think advertising will ever go away, but I love the idea of brands moving, towards more of a model where they're actually just giving us something of value, giving us either an amazing product that speaks for itself and investing more in that piece of, their business, looking at their business practices and making sure, they're up to snuff and their green practices are up to snuff, because the realization that, these platforms and these audiences are going to talk on my behalf, and that'll be, my marketing engine, if you will. I feel like that's a big piece of it. And I think, giving us more content, too, is a great movement that I'm seeing, a lot of brands actually set themselves up to take advantage of as they move into this space.
And then so maybe Patrick, this is for you, do you see the day where you are moving audiences from where you're at into an Xbox or into sort of an Amazon experience?
Yeah, I could see a day for that, and I think that in general, the broader movement behind it is that less and less we're thinking about advertising, and more we're thinking about content, and less in terms of just content for content, but really about credible storytelling, and storytelling that people and consumers want to get engaged in. So just putting up an ad that tells a value proposition is not enough. You can't tell people anymore. You've got to engage them. They've got to take an emotional journey with you. And brands that are unable to get their consumers to take an emotional journey with them will fail over time. And I think that it goes back to the over-indexing on audience targeting. Is you can't just have a decision tree. The data can't just be about that. It can't say, if then this ad anymore. You have to basically think about what's the data telling me? Who's sitting back and saying, what's the insight? What's the emotional trigger? What are the things that are really going to motivate people to get closer to my brand? And I think that that's what the whole less advertising, more content and storytelling is all about.
Well, and the more that we're able to tie all of that together, and we can say, you know what, that funny little rap video that you put on YouTube actually did more for you than the 40 million you spent over here on some big fancy TV commercial. Yeah. The more we're going to see some of that consumer-driven, evolution and how they go to market.
Yeah, and the other thing is that in general, sorry, it's my turn. But in general, I think that we've been at a huge, online, with this whole idea of content, we've been at a huge disadvantage because we've relied on things like banners and buttons to tell a story. We overlay data on it. Yeah. We think it's going to be great because we hit the right audience, and it's like you can't tell a story with a banner or button. You need big canvases that can tell a story. You need great content, and you also need creative people that just don't think about copy and image. You also have to think about folks that can think about data, that they can think about what's the functionality in the ad to bring out dimensions of the brand with that and data.
Go ahead.
Mike's vision was that we would be all interrupting each other, so we're bringing it to life. Yeah. Just to build on that a little bit, I think when we think about content and emotional connection, a lot of that is also thinking about the shareability. And there's going to be some things where, it's intended just to be a big blockbuster spot, and it's not necessarily like you hope people share it, but that's not at its core. But there's a lot of things where your intent is that this connects emotion with someone, and then that they want to share it. And it's, I think, really thinking through, like, well, what are the things that need to happen for that? First of all, you have to have an asset that has, a unique kind of level of shareability because of the way it connects or because of the way it surprised somebody. There's something about it that broke through and made them, want to actually do something. But also, everyone's personal social identity, anything you share is part of who you are, and it's part of, the brand you're building for yourself. And so, just thinking through what are the steps that would need to happen, and then even at the tactical level. A couple weeks ago, Toys R Us named Xbox One as one of their top 10 gifts of the season. I was like, that's awesome. And so I was planning on going and trying to share it. And so I went to the page, and it's 10 beautiful products, and there was nothing on there that enabled you to share it. And I was like, well, that's kind of crazy, because this is something that someone might want to share with their family, like, hey, top 10 gifts for the holidays. And so it's the simple things of okay, well, if you're going to go and create something like that, you should make it really easy for someone to take an action on it.
So what's funny is that can still happen.
Yeah.
Right? Just the basics. So I guess when we looked at that evolution slide earlier, there's all sorts of evolution still happening in this side of the business. So I'm actually super excited about this because I've had so many people that I've worked with or friends sort of go in-house to kind of be an account planner inside of a big brand, or the way that because I actually hope we see more and more of this from more and more brands, and I think we will. I think Target or Best Buy or even Nordstrom, right? So there's one thing I'm curious about with the data story is I've got this book, and I had joked with these guys.
Oh, we're going through the book.
Yeah, I had joked with these guys that if it got too quiet, that I would just start reading passages from this book. But somebody gave me this book a couple days ago, and I read it in about 3 hours. It's my kind of book, because it's small words, lots of pictures. It's called QR Codes Kill Kittens: How to Alienate Customers, Dishearten Employees, and Drive Your Business into the Ground. And it's by Scott Stratton. And I don't know Scott, and he should thank me for plugging his book. But it got me thinking about when it goes wrong. When have you used sort of data in your day-to-day, and when did it go wrong? And you don't have to name names. Patrick, I know. You?
I have an example. So I used to do marketing for Bing with several people in the room here. And we tried to use data quite a bit in our marketing, and we had a number of contextual search units. So basically it was an ad unit that would pull in contextual information based on the content you were viewing or what you might have just searched on. So it's kind of brilliant in a way. But just trying to think through what's this person's state of mind. But it involved a lot of technology in terms of saying, oh, well, I'm on, the Huffington Post, and I'm reading an article about this topic, so therefore this might be something I want to search on. But we ended up pulling in some fascinating terms that maybe were not appropriate for our brand in that process. And so that was, kind of automation gone awry in terms of really needing to think through, okay, this is a great idea, and in 99% of the cases, it's fantastic. But, you need to keep an eye on, how the execution happens and how to put safeguards in place.
Yeah, we had a travel account that was, it was pretty new to this market, and looking at the data, they had an awareness problem, and so they were thinking, okay, it's an awareness problem. Let's throw a bunch of money at it and treat it like it's an awareness problem. When we actually looked at when people in this marketplace book travel, they book so far out. And all of this money, we were going, branding, branding, branding. The reality was, when we were putting offers in there, the offers were just not at the time period that they needed them. We were trying to get butts and seats at the same time they were trying to do the branding. But if we would have had these offers for hey, plan your Christmas travel, or plan your travel that's happening 6 months from now, we would have seen a much better performance. But we didn't look at that piece of data. We looked at the awareness data. So looking at the breadth and depth of everything that people are telling you and really making sense of it. trying it all.
I think it actually goes to something you said earlier, which was you've got to look at all the data, and then you've got to rise above it.
Yeah.
Right. I do think that sometimes in advertising we see the data stories that we want to see. Mm-hmm. It's just like anything else, right? And that you've got to have that thing on your shoulder that tells you that you've got to honestly look at all of it.
Yeah. Well, the new quote is, "It's only big data if you do big things with it."
You just said big data. Drink.
Build that to Undertone.
So we should stop calling it big data. We should call it "do big things with it." Now people could take that wrong, but I wouldn't put it on a T-shirt.
Nobody's writing that down.
That garnered 0 tweets. Great. Okay. So we have 5 minutes left for Q&A, and they've asked me to ask you to use the microphone here, and it'd be really good to get some questions to these guys. So please go for it.
So I was at the retail session on Monday, and a woman from Whole Foods said that their data showed them that their customers didn't want to be tracked, and that they should spend their money on in-store experience. So what do you guys think about?
Well, I think that there's a really interesting triangle with that one, because I think everybody wants things to be more relevant, and then you get those, I don't want to be tracked. So it's like, well, you want to, as an advertiser, do you want me to be relevant, or do you want me not to be relevant? And you've got to give up some data on that. But what's really interesting in terms of people's fear is things like Axiom with Scott Howe doing all about the data, and it's a website where you can go in, and Axiom, one of these big data providers, you can go in there and you can adjust your data profile. You can spoof it if you want. And I think there are a lot of people that say, I don't want to be tracked, I don't want to do this. And what's brilliant about Scott is it goes out there and says, hey, I will give you the keys to the kingdom. You can go and change your data. My theory is that apathy will rule even with the people that fear data the most.
It's true. And those same people that have a problem with it are the same people that are bitching about getting meth addiction ads on Facebook or what have you, you know. Why am I getting this? It's a give and take. You know why? I did not get them. But yeah, it's a give and take. It's a give and take. And I think, you know, like we all as consumers need to be educated on, you know, what that looks like, you know, but it's a relationship right there that we're engaging in.
Anyone else, please?
Hi, I work at PayScale, and we have a salary survey, so we actually gather a lot of information from our users. So we have this huge database. But we're still a relatively small company in terms of employees. And my question is, you know, if you do have this big data, you know, resource, how do you have, I guess, suggestions around tools or firms or things that are out there to kind of translate that data into usable action?
Within the media targetability space, you need a DMP, you need a data management platform. It's not enough to just have sort of the analytics view, but the ability to actually port that data out to all of these various media publishers and use it as a targeting capability. You can also take that same DMP and use it to power site-side experience builds, as well as, you know, informing pieces of your email. I would say Blue Kai, Adobe both have great products. I would say Blue Kai is top of the heap for that, though.
With brand storytelling, which platforms are you seeing the most success right now, and what type of content are they publishing?
Which platforms are we seeing the most success with now? Media platforms.
From a brand perspective,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
From a brand perspective. Like,
Yeah.
is it social media? Is it owned websites? Where?
Oh, God, it's just the perfect storm of it all. I would say video is gangbusters right now across all platforms. Just the consumption's up overall. It's not that TV's down, but just people are all about it. Short form, long form, episodic, all of it. I would say, you know, obviously social platforms are starting to evolve in a way where advertising is actually doing a bit more on those platforms. You know, having ads within the news feed, although everybody bitched and moaned about it for a while, we're all used to it now. It's performing well as a retargeting platform. You know, weirdly enough, retargeting is actually doing well, and standard display units, when they're relevant and personalized, people actually click on them. Strange. I do. The first ads that I actually clicked on was a couple years ago when retargeting started.
Yeah, and I think for us, our attention is more of looking at the consumer more holistically and trying to tie the experiences together. So we're investing a lot of money in responsive design ad formats to enable just that, so that it's the same experience whether you're on a tablet, you're on display, smartphone, and again, it's to take a singular view of the consumer and not look at schizophrenic as a consumer as, oh, this is a mobile consumer and this is a video consumer and this is a TV consumer. It's all the same person, and we're trying to tie that together.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is I think for Xbox as an entertainment brand, there's no question it's visual content. So whether that's a video or that's imagery, but I think for different brands, you know, that could vary depending on what the brand's trying to achieve. I know I'll use Starbucks as an example. I follow them on social channels, and at least for me, I probably wouldn't watch a Starbucks video. Sorry, Kelly, but I do look at offers and I do look at visuals, and I'm getting their brand messaging. But so I think to some degree it depends. And then the last thing I would add is we've spent a lot of time thinking it's not only. It'd be easy to say, okay, great, we're going to move and start being more visual. But there's so much nuance in the type of the tonality and in the type of visual. And so it's really needing to go pretty deep into not only like what's the right medium, but within that, you have to experiment. You have to try different things. A nice thing about platforms like Instagram and Twitter, you can very quickly see what's resonating and then go from there.
I would even throw Tumblr in there too. And it's really asking brands to look at themselves differently and get things solid on how do we want to look and feel, how do we want to communicate visually, because you instantaneously, when you go to a brand's Tumblr page, there it all is, and it can communicate so, with so much impact without any words.
Do you see, what's the split then to reactive content versus proactive content in the storytelling of the brands then?
Well, I like you said earlier, you can't just talk to yourself. You can't talk to your best customers all the time and accomplish things. You've got to have this mix. I think it varies. If you've got a massive retained audience on all of these own channels and within your data, you activate that first and foremost. You take the insights from what you get from that activation and find more of those folks out there. There's a lot of lookalikes going on. There's a lot of data modeling, work that's happening. And those folks will perform a little bit better than, publisher-provided third-party targeting in most cases.
I also think there's a real-time aspect to that. So I think you can plan on, here's some messages that we want to, have at certain times. But we also need to pay attention to what's happening, whether that's within our space or within our consumers. But, paying attention to the conversation that's happening, right, and doing real-time marketing. A few weeks ago, we didn't realize this was going to happen, but LeBron James gave his son a Xbox cake. It was like an Xbox-themed birthday party, and he tweeted this cake. So it was like a huge gift because we were not expecting that would happen. But because we were listening and because we were watching, we were able to engage with him and engage in this pop culture moment and take advantage of it. It doesn't have to be that. It could be just that, this something's happening in pop culture, and how as a brand can you connect to that and connect with your audience in a way that is compelling to them.
We have time for one more.
So someone was talking earlier about Whole Foods customers not wanting to be tracked. We hear a lot about the do not track thing and settings for that, and I feel like there's another segment of people that actually would prefer to be tracked. And you were talking about the difficulty in linking those different channels, mobile and social, and all those things. If you could put those together, that'd be kind of a holy grail. So do you think do you agree? Do you think like that there's like a valid possibility to maybe a platform or some kind of opt-in system where you could say, hey, on a double-blind system, count me, count my behavior. I'm this person. Here's all my social networks and whatever, and just feed these.
My social security number.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like you could blind that to advertisers and make that just part of aggregate data that's shoved out there, and so that you could be properly targeted.
Yeah.
So that your ads are contextually relevant and all that stuff just on an ongoing basis, and you're building this, profile of yourself as a consumer.
I think it'll absolutely happen. I think it'll happen through the browser.
Yeah, and there's people that have been talking about models like that where you actually would go in almost like a reverse auction of your personal data. So you basically go out there and say, hey, I'm interested in these things and my data is valuable. I'd like to get rewarded for that somehow. And I will gladly tell you where I want to go, what I want to do, what I want to buy.
Yeah, it's kind of like an inbound loyalty program for yourself.
And there are startups
right?
that are,
So you could be that.
And I've seen
entity.
startups do that in fits and starts, and there's been conversations over the last decade actually of doing exactly that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a successful model yet, but it's an interesting thought. And I think especially when we get in the millennial generation, they're a lot more comfortable with data. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably a little bit more my generation and my parents' generation that our data was always being sold. The credit cards were always giving this away, but you never noticed it. And the reason you didn't notice it is because the catalog from J. Crew or Victoria's Secret came 3 months later.
Yeah.
So you never really made that connection. And it's the immediacy which caused the fear about data when I did a behavior and immediately I was being served a specific ad with shoes or whatever. I think people are getting more comfortable with that now. I think as we actually get into the more predictive realm, that goes away again because the connection between what I just did and what I will see in terms of an advertiser goes away.
And I believe that's becoming part of the consumer's shopping experience. They know that if they do X, Y, and Z and they just hang out for a minute, they might have some interesting stuff put in front of them. I do that.
Great. Hey guys,
Thank you.
Thanks very much to each of you. I know you guys are just slammed with
Thanks,
stuff.
Mike.